Chef's life, the truth. So, hotels versus restaurants. Gotta say, favourite subject. One of my favourite subjects around this. So, I've worked in both, and I'd say the big difference is, just getting straight into it, would be in a restaurant, quite often you've got a bigger chance of being an all-rounder as opposed to in a hotel. You wouldn't say specialize, but you're closer to it. You work with one area of the kitchen, or one area of the kitchen at a time, and then the different teams working in those different areas together produce the full menu, and all of that food that one customer, one table actually eats through their starters and their main courses and their desserts, and that all of that can actually come from different teams within a hotel kitchen, as opposed to a restaurant. And depending on the size of the restaurant and the quality of the restaurant, you may have just a couple of chefs doing more of those things. The work is still split up into certain areas, and so that's sort of the big difference. Restaurants, I was working and growing up, were depending on the size of the town, and the quality of the restaurant you're working in, sort of defined what a lot of the things, definitely the produce you're purchasing, and the menus that you're actually able to produce and work on. In a smaller town, you're limited to the chefs that are there. If you're lucky, you're getting people that have worked around the world in different areas, bigger areas, and then bring that knowledge to the smaller towns. As a younger chef, you're limited to where you can sort of work to gain knowledge and gain skills. And the same thing, you chefs tend to move around, mainly to learn, but they're also pretty good at splitting the dummy and packing a sad, getting angry and depressed. Or when I say depressed, maybe probably more pissed off, and for one reason or another. And they work hard and get, probably say, because of the stress, they find somebody to blame. Could be the people they're working with in the kitchen, could be the restaurant staff, the waiters, waitresses, could be the owners, whatever. They find enough reason to blame somebody, which basically justifies it in their head to just tell them to get stuffed, and they will leave sooner or later. So you move on to the next place. In a small town, that behaviour comes back to bite you after a while, because you basically run out of places to work and everybody talks. So hence chefs that can't sort of get out of that bad habit of throwing in the towel end up moving cities and moving towns as well. But restaurants versus hotels, then there are some amazing restaurants, really trying to, I guess, work at the absolute highest level, charge absolute top dollar. I think from an investment point of view, if you're lucky, you as a head chef, you will have some investors behind you. You may have part ownership, full ownership. From what I have seen, is pretty few and far between. There's some pretty amazing places and with big names and the stars, but then for every one of those, there are, I'm guessing, hundreds of people that have tried it and failed financially. Not because they're not good cooks, but financially it's a hell of a lot harder than what people realise. It's my impression. So if we're talking sort of Michelin star restaurants, quite often any chef that's putting their name on a place like that has got people that are investing in him. So then basically straight away you're quite often a bit of a slave to whoever's giving you that money. And if you're lucky enough to pull it off and get your star and get your attention, then you've got to keep it. Making money in a place like that is basically to be able to cook at that level. If you want to actually pay the staff the time and effort that actually takes to cook that, you will not be able to make money. It's definitely my opinion. A lot of these restaurants are basically just getting a lot of chefs to work more or less for nothing or pretty close to it, for long hours, just to basically put that name of that restaurant in their CV, to move on and get a better job somewhere else, a better job for themselves somewhere else, as opposed to actually at the place where they actually worked for almost nothing, just for the name. So with the free labour, then gives you opportunity to do better food, put more time and effort into the food, and therefore you can afford the good ingredients, and then you can still take pretty good money from your customers. But it's definitely part of the industry that people basically work for very low wages just for the name. So that's sort of the top end of it. Yes, I have worked for nothing for some pretty good restaurants, and I know what I'm talking about there. I'm not saying really wrong or right. It is what it is. I'm not criticizing. I guess now I'm a lot older, but I'm not criticizing these places for doing it. I believe that good food needs that effort put into it, and if the finances don't line up with actually paying people to do it, and people want to do it, it's a passion, right? So that's if you're living a dream or trying to create a dream, and you want to work with that at that level, then that's what you have to do. Suck it up and do it. It's not forever. Nobody works for free forever, right? It's like any business. If you're building yourself as a business, your career, your knowledge, you've got to be prepared to do something for nothing. And that's the same in many different careers, and working as a chef is at a top level for good restaurants is the same. The people at the top get the money, and the people down the bottom don't get a hell of a lot. So condoning it, I think the people doing it, they know what they're getting themselves into, and they know why. And that's just the way it is. Hotels, different story. So I've worked in 5-star hotels in 2 different sides of the world, and Europe included, and different there. Normally don't work that much for free. Does happen. I have worked in 5-star hotels working 18 hours a day and only got paid for 8. On multiple occasions, on weeks and weeks out, I've done that. Same thing there, just for the experience, just to get ahead. But 5-star hotels normally just pay lower wages than restaurants at the end of the day, and you will but then you've got more job security, and the hotels will be there day in, day out. They'll change names, they'll change flavours, The chefs quite often stay the same once they get a little bit older. There's a more of a long-term thing from working in a hotel environment, but it's a different type of work, and sometimes a different type of food as well. Shitty cheap restaurants, hotels are not that much fun to work in and really quite depressing, and can actually be quite dirty and messy as well. But then again, there are budget hotels that's their specific target. I've seen a lot of hotels that end up budget, and they used to be a lot better. Those are the ones I'd definitely avoid. I'd sleep in them, but I wouldn't eat in them, if you put it that way. Then you've got the ones that target a budget at a certain level. Those ones have made a conscious effort to deliver food service at a certain level, and you know what you're getting basically for the money you're spending. Hotel chains. So we go the difference between hotel and I would say these days, what's all the trendy ones? Boutique hotels, theme hotels. I'm not talking meaning theme parks as in Disneyland. I'm talking a music style hotel with higher quality art type hotels with different rooms designed all differently, so no room is the same, that type of thing. You got some amazing choices, and the food from some of those. I'm thinking more boutique hotels. I'm thinking now, some of the food can actually then, that thought of creating something special and something different can actually push down into the kitchen and the dining room as well. Worked in places like that as well, and that's probably a quite an energized place to work at. Normally not that traditional, don't follow that, you get to break a few rules, and those hotels can be quite exciting. Normally slightly smaller, and not the bigger kitchen brigades in the traditional classical sense. Kitchen brigades I'll break down in another podcast and explain how that all works in the organisation. But restaurants, beer restaurants versus hotels. If we go then for smaller restaurants, I guess as part of this podcast, I'll tell you some tips and tricks about things to avoid. I guess one theme is just, it's food, right? So avoid food poisoning. Nobody wants it. And the cold hard truth is, I'm guessing a lot of people are getting sick around the world right now because of bad food handling practices in hotels and restaurants. And I'm talking from the bottom of the barrel to the top class restaurant. It doesn't matter. It happens in all of them. Just because they've got a menu with everything on it and it's all executed perfectly and you're paying top dollar, does not necessarily mean that the food practices that are being done behind the scenes are of a higher quality as far as food safety are concerned. Sometimes even the opposite could occur, that I say chefs working long hours, the financial constraints are huge. Restaurants come and go. You see the good ones were great for 2 years, they end up crap for 2 years and then they disappear. So would you really want to be eating in it on their last year as they are just scraping to get by, and the investors are finding a way to get the hell out of it? It all starts to cost, but they're still trying to run that menu the way they ran it the day they started it, when they had twice as many people in the kitchen, and the produce they were buying was, you know, absolutely perfect, and they were throwing food away because they wanted to keep it as fresh as possible, and they start hanging on to things another day, and they start freezing some stuff and then bring it out again. They start cutting the corners. It happens. I've seen it happen. I've done it. I know the tricks. I've been told to do it, forced to do it, and this is same between restaurants and hotels. So it's sort of like almost like a wave, for a successful hotel or restaurant, and that's what I mean by that is they've got a lifespan. They've got their glory days. They start, they try, they either get success or they don't. They cut back, they adjust, they adapt, or they ride that wave. And someone else's flavour of the month, suddenly things change. Head chef leaves, spits the dummy. Right hand man takes over. He's already been worked into the ground for 2 years. He's got no other ideas of his own. Customers might notice. Things change. So as that wave, that sort of life cycle rolls around for any restaurant, food safety and the risks around that happen as well. So yeah, there's always a risk with any restaurant. So my rule of thumb, restaurant or hotel, whenever I'm eating, I'm taking in all of these things, all of these thoughts are going through my head, all of my senses are like just open and aware, looking for basically doing an analysis from even walking up to the place, walking through the front door. I'm assessing where in that life cycle phase they are, and with that I can then make a risk assessment of the food handling techniques that are going on behind the scenes, looking at the restaurant, looking at the cutlery, the tablecloths, the menus, the corners of the menu, the papers, are they cutting costs anywhere, because that'll always relate back into the kitchen. The state of the carpet, everything gives me a signal, and then based on that risk assessment, what do I order? What foods can they store? What foods are worked too hard? What foods have they as a higher risk with? Would I actually eat shellfish or seafood in this restaurant? Higher risk foods. Are they cooked cold eggs somewhere? So they cooked those eggs 2 days ago and then they're going to give it to me in a salad. Things like that. There's all sorts of things. Or do I just take a nice bit of meat that I know really popular, basically just take the hamburger off on the menu? If it's a hamburger place, then they should be tossing quite a few burgers and they should be good enough. So I'll just eat the hamburger when everybody else in the place is eating the chicken and the fish and all the rest of it. Oh, this is lovely, and I'm just thinking, shit, you poor people, I hope you're alright tomorrow morning. I will eat my hamburger, and I know I've got the lowest risk piece of food in my mouth for this place, and that mentality is between hotels or restaurants. It doesn't change. So that's food safety when it comes to hotels and restaurants. But anyway, lots of other differences. Those are a few thoughts. Which one do I prefer? From a food safety perspective, I'd probably say the higher class hotel as opposed to a higher class restaurant. In a higher class restaurant, I'd jump in there within the first 2 years and feel the wave that they're on. Higher class restaurant that's at the other end, I'll avoid them like the plague. Which is harsh, which means the people own it, they'll sink like a stone quickly once it starts to go down. High class hotel. And my rule of thumb when I go out eating is this: I'd rather spend money on the best restaurant in town or go to McDonald's. Everything in between is a risk. And that's it. I'm never disappointed when I go to McDonald's. I know exactly what I'm going to get. It's crap, it's disgusting, but I don't get sick. Best restaurant in town, as long as you're on the right side of that wave, I shouldn't have to worry too much about the risks, and hopefully the food is executed correctly, and I'll get my money's worth. But anywhere in between, I'm bound to be disappointed. But that's part of my pessimism. Anyway, good. Those are our thoughts for today. This is the chef's life, the truth. This was hotels versus restaurants. Cheers.